Well, hello everybody. Welcome to the Guiding Star Astrology channel. And do I have a treat for you? Because once again, our series looking at the mythology, the astronomy, and the astrology of our skies with David Warner Mathisen is about to unfold before your very eyes. And this week we are looking at the effects of the great god of the underworld, Pluto. So thank you, David, for joining us here at Guiding Star Astrology again.
Well, thank you so much, Kesenya, and thank you to all around the world who are joining in.
It is certainly an exciting week astrologically from the perspective of looking at Pluto. This week, Pluto turns retrograde, and this is happening in most parts of the world on the 7th of May. And Pluto remains retrograde in the skies until October the 16th. So that's quite a substantial piece of the year that he will be retrograding. To our vantage point on Earth, looks like he's going backwards in the sky. And he's going to move backwards from 5 degrees of Aquarius to 3 degrees of Aquarius. It's not very far because this little planet moves very slowly and only covers very small territory in any given year. So he's only retrograding back those couple of degrees. But if you have planets conjunct with that area, sort of 5 to 3 degrees or 3 to 5 degrees of Aquarius, or any of the other fixed signs, Leo, Scorpio, or Taurus, you will be receiving an extra aspect from Pluto to your planets at 3 to 5 degrees of the fixed signs. You could also consider the trinal signs, so the other air signs. If you have planets at 3 to 5 degrees of Aquarius, Gemini, or Libra as well, there will be extra activation for more of the positive energy, actually, if you have a planet in those areas of the air signs. So it's a very interesting time for a lot of us who've got planets being activated by Pluto retrograde. So I might just spend a couple of minutes, Dave, talking about what Pluto retrograde does and his effects and what we can expect to see. And then we'll jump into some more information about this amazing god of the underworld. There's been a lot of discussion about Pluto over the last couple of years in astrology because he's recently changed signs, and this is a fairly rare occurrence. He spends, in this case, 20 years in the sign of Aquarius. So this is just one of many retrograde cycles that Pluto is going to go through every year up until he leaves Aquarius in 2044. So this will not be an unusual experience by the time we get to 2044 to have a retrograde Pluto in Aquarius. When Pluto is direct in a chart, his transits often manifest as sort of external upheavals and transformations and big change because he is the god of big transformations and rebirths and regenerations and 180-degree turnarounds in life. But when we hit this retrograde period, this Lord of the Underworld energy actually gets turned inward. And this essentially results in more deep psychological changes that happen within us and within the collective consciousness as well, interestingly enough. So essentially, Pluto's going retrograde in the sky. And he's going backwards in our lives, back over old ground, making sure that he's left no stone unturned in his mission to reveal all the darkness and all the cobwebs in our personal soul basement and in the collective consciousness as well. What has been left, with cobwebs on it, what has been left unturned that we need to rediscover and reanalyze, etc. The first thing that springs to mind when I think about how this might affect the collective is perhaps we will be revisiting back to the Epstein files again, and that will be all dredged up once more for us to comb over once again as a collective. But on a personal level, we might find that we're going over old habits, old behavior patterns that we just can't seem to let go of, even though we know it's in our best interest to do so. So it is a really refining time in many, many ways. Some people, they're going to come undone during Pluto retrograde. Truths will come out and the ground will be further prepared for new power dynamics that will actually be birthed in our personal lives and in the collective once he turns direct again in October. So it's kind of a new foundation, if you like, being built, but there's a purging that's involved with that. Any projects or transformations that began while Pluto was direct, which he has been for, roughly 5 or 6 months now, they might seem to kind of stall now. If we started something new during that that Pluto direct period, they might feel like they're not gaining any traction once Pluto starts retrograding. But the reality of this is that what Pluto is doing is creating a stronger foundation beneath the surface that maybe we can't see or won't realize until his direct motion comes into play. It's, like I said, a refining period. Pluto also governs, in astrology, influence, power, and control. So during this retrograde period, we're forced to look at where we may have abdicated our power, given it away to someone else, and where we're no longer comfortable doing that. And we'll be working on ways to take our power back during the retrograde season. We can also be made aware of where we're using our own power in manipulative ways, and we might be called to account during Pluto retrograde season for such things. Pluto is always more intense when he's retrograde, so personal issues relating to the powers of death and rebirth and regeneration and rejuvenation, all those words, they're actually incredible during Pluto retrograde energy. And usually where we're going to see something rejuvenated or rebirthed in our lives will correspond to where Pluto is sitting, or transiting, I should say, in our birth chart. So for me as a Pisces rising, in the whole sign astrology, Aquarius is my 12th house. That will be the area that I will be regenerating, rejuvenating, and rebirthing something over the course of these few months that Pluto is retrograde. If you're a Sagittarius rising, then Aquarius is going to be your 3rd house of business and buying, selling, trading, siblings, etc. So there might be something being regenerated or rejuvenated in those areas of life if you're a Sagittarius rising, for example. So this roughly 5-month period is like an incubator for major life transformations. The process is like a caterpillar in a cocoon. So can I just encourage everybody watching this, if you need to withdraw, if you need to take time out or isolate yourself to cope with this transformation that's actually taking place in your life, just allow it. Don't beat yourself up if you need to rest and relax and have a pajama day every now and then. We're all going to be looking forward to the butterfly that's going to be born out of the cocoon in October. And this goes for the collective experience as well. This is a refining period, and the collective might be birthed into a whole new reality once Pluto goes direct in October. The plutocracy, the power elements of society are all going through a major shift over the next 5 months too. So very, very interesting to see in world astrology how that might play out. But my friends, the stage is getting set. Get my words out. Stage is getting set for a big shift. And that's what I feel astrologically are the main themes of this particular Pluto retrograde. But Dave, I'm going to hand over to you now, because we love hearing about the mythology and the astronomy that you can pull out of these themes.
Well, thanks, Kesenya. That was a really interesting dive into the heavens and what's going on with the planet Pluto. And so if I can share my screen here, I will
allow you to do that. Sorry about that.
No, I haven't even tried, so I don't know if you set it up or not, but I'm just ready to talk a little bit about the god Pluto. And as listeners who have looked at some of the previous interviews that we've done together, or who are familiar with my work, know I investigate for the past 16, 17 years. I've been investigating the connections between the myths and the stars, and the overwhelming evidence that shows that the world's ancient myths are based on the stars. Mm-hmm. They're universal around the world. The different gods and goddesses correspond not just to planets, as we might expect from what we've just been talking about, the planet Pluto, the planet Jupiter. Those are the divine powers, Venus moving through the sky and having impacts on us. those are gods and goddesses, but also the constellations themselves are the basis for these different stories and myths that we find around the world. It's part of an ancient worldwide system. And I've written a book called The Ancient Worldwide System and several other books that talk about this. So let's explore a little bit about this mysterious figure of the god of the underworld. As you also mentioned, the god of great wealth, the god that's the god of death. And let's see what maybe in the sky corresponds to Pluto and some of the stories surrounding this god, and see what lessons we might be able to glean from that. So I will share my screen. Let's see here. Oh, looks like I'm already sharing. I'm fine with it. So here is a statue. This is a statue of the god of the underworld. It's a Roman era statue, which is a copy from the Greek original. And the source where I found this particular image says that that black toga or shawl that's draped over his shoulder was added later in the early modern period, maybe by a classical sculptor or something. But it's quite dramatic to put this black toga on this marble figure of the god of the underworld. And his name in Greek was, as most people know, the god of the underworld was called Hades, the god of death. And that Greek name Hades, sometimes it was also spelled with an I after the A, and sometimes it was actually even spelled without the H, Aedes, like this. Or another variation that we see is Aedonius, Aedonius, which is very interesting because there's these rivers in the underworld, in the myths of ancient Greece. The rivers of the underworld include the river Styx, which is so sacred that the gods would swear by the river Styx when they really wanted to swear an oath of great power and importance, the river Styx. But there's also the river of Acheron and these other, the Cocytus or Cocytus River, these rivers of the underworld. But what's really interesting is in the Bible, there's a place that has four rivers at the very beginning. You know what it's called? The Garden of,
the
there's a Garden of
Eden.
that's surrounded, or it's got four rivers in it, just like the rivers of Hades. And Eden is really an interesting potential phonological or etymological connection to the name of the god of the underworld, Aedonius, Aedonius.
Wow.
I don't know, I don't know that I've ever seen anyone talking about that, but the rivers in the heavens, I have talked about which could be the river Styx, which could be the river Acheron. The different rivers in the heavens are, because we're talking, they're in the constellations, we're talking about celestial places. The Garden of Eden can be shown to be in the sky when, when they get thrown out of the Garden of Eden, it's because their constellations are setting in the west. They're returning to the dust in the story of the Garden of Eden. Same thing with the underworld of Hades, the god of the underworld, is in the heavens. We can find these different places in mythology in the sky, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the Greeks did not like to call upon this god by his name. He was too feared. He's the god of the dead, the god of the underworld. So they usually called him, instead of saying Hades, they would call him the wealthy one. And that title was Pluton or Ploton, the wealthy one. And that's where we get Pluto. And as you mentioned, plutocracy means rule by the wealthy. There was a Greek philosopher named Aristotle who said most democracies they may be a democracy in name, but they're really an oligarchy. Or if they're not an oligarchy yet, most democracies devolve
Mm.
They decay into an oligarchy.
Yep,
Well,
we're saying that now.
that's a Greek word. Oligarchy means rule by the few rather than democracy, which means rule by the people. Plutocracy is very similar to an oligarchy. It means rule by the wealthy, rule by the wealthiest. So, um, but Pluto, the god of the underworld, he had a fearsome, reputation because of being the god of the dead, but also he was also the god of all the wealth that was in the ground, all the gold, all the jewels, all the diamonds, all the silver, all the wealth that's under the earth. Today, we would say also, these are the gifts of this god of wealth. We would say today also petroleum or
Mm.
oil that comes from under the earth, and men fight wars over it because
So.
it's, yes, unfortunately, but that is a gift of this god. All the different gods and goddesses, all the different natural resources come in the ancient understanding, come as gifts from the gods. So the rain comes from the, you know, gods of the sky and rain and storms, but the grain comes from the goddess Demeter or Ceres, the goddess of the grain. And then the gifts of the wealth that's hidden under the earth were gifts from the god Pluto. And he was also, I mentioned swearing by the river Styx or making oaths. He was considered to be so deep under in the underworld that he couldn't really hear everything that was going on
Mm.
in the upper world. All he could hear was when you swore or when people made oaths. He could hear that. So when you've got to be careful when you utter swear words or oaths, or if you read old books, sometimes they'll say instead of a swear word, they'll call it an oath. Those powerful words, there's certain words that are so powerful they carry all the way down to the underworld, and the god of the underworld can hear them. So be careful with
Mm.
that. But he's also
Did
a
he
god.
approve or disprove of the?
Well, he would hear it and then he'd hold you to it.
Okay.
So it's in line with what you're talking about, where, when you swear to something, you've got to carry it out, or where when Pluto is going back and forth in the heavens because of this retrograde action, it's he's doing some deep work.
Mm.
I think it's related to that concept. So you don't want to take oaths lightly because you have to carry them out. In fact, I wasn't even thinking of talking about this, but my master's thesis, it can be found online, and it's about the heroic oath in Old English literature. When you spoke an oath or even a boast, when you talked about your prowess, if you said something like, "I will slay that dragon," well, then you're expected to do it.
Mm.
So there's two kinds of men. One who says things and doesn't
Follow through.
follow up, and then one whose words match his deeds.
Yeah.
And so,
And there's a theory that, our words are like spells. The word
mm,
spell, what we say is actually casting, in a sense, a spell as well. So when we say F me over something,
mm,
that's a negative spell that obviously Pluto can hear,
we can hear that.
sort of casting negative energy. So
Well,
good
and
reminder.
that's right. And a lot of times when you're swearing or cursing, you're the only one in the room. So who are you really cursing, or who are you? You've got to be careful with that. It's um, often when people are cursing, it's actually they're angry at themselves or they're
Mm.
cursing themselves, and that's just something that well, I think we've said enough about it for listeners to
Well, it's worth knowing.
consider that. Yeah, it's worth thinking about. But there's he's a god of great, you know, profundity, depth, and power, and awesome gravity, but also of gifts and blessings. So here's another statue of Pluto. This is actually from the Hellenistic period when they were starting to incorporate, um, it's called syncretism, where they're starting to take the symbols of gods from other cultures and blend them together. So this is often discussed under syncretism because the sculptures in this period, this is after Alexander the Great of Macedon, spread Greek Hellenistic culture around to places where it hadn't been before. And now the symbols of the gods and goddesses of Egypt are being connected in with.
Right.
So this is Pluto or Hades with his consort queen Persephone, the goddess of the underworld. But she has some of the characteristics of Isis. She's got a on her head the twin horns, on her forehead of Isis, and even sometimes we'll have a cobra. And she's carrying a little sesterce or kind of a hand tambourine, like a little uh,
Shaker, like
like
maraca.
yeah, but with like a tambourine has those little metal discs, but this
Mm.
instead of being round is
It's
uh,
great.
yeah, but it's not really like a maraca that clicks. It's more like a tambourine that
Sure. And
but
is it Cerberus, the three-headed dog? Am I
that's
saying that
right.
right?
That's right. Cerberus or Cerberus, as the Romans would pronounce it with the hard C, but we usually say Cerberus or Cerberus. He has three heads, and the these statues, they believe that Persephone might have been holding like a chain or a leash that went over to the three-headed dog at the feet of
Right.
Hades there. And actually on his head, so he's holding a staff, and on his head is a specific measuring cup or device for grain, measuring out the grain, which is an Egyptian symbol. He's the god of the underworld, but he's also associated with the gifts of the soil. Now, Persephone is the daughter of Demeter or Ceres, the goddess of grain and abundance and all the food harvest that we depend upon. And so this story of how Persephone ended up with Pluto is one of the most famous myths about the god of the underworld that we'll go into in just a moment. And Persephone is the daughter of Demeter. So Demeter became very upset with Hades for abducting her daughter. It's called usually the rape of Persephone. Rape, in this case, being actually a word that means the abduction or actually the grabbing, the seizing of Persephone. If you think of the actual word um, in, I think it's originally a Latin or maybe it's a Greek word, but it means to grab, like a raptor. All
Oh,
the different birds that are categorized as a raptor is all the birds of prey that grab fish out of the lakes, like a eagle in its talons. Or the rapture, it comes from a word in the Bible that means to be snatched up, to be
God.
snatched up.
Good.
So this is the snatching, the seizing of Persephone is sometimes called the rape or the abduction of Persephone. And her name in Roman or Latin was Proserpine. Um, there's, I won't go off on a tangent, but there's some indication that the Romans just, not only do they have the same gods and goddesses with different names, it's the same. The Romans came from the Greeks. Some authors have argued the Romans are the Greeks. The Romans, they're not different. We think of them as different. Anyway, that's a whole different tangent. But Persephone, the Romans, of course, called Hades Pluto, as we've already been talking about why that might be. Now, here's a picture from a book when I was a child, and I've still got this original book right here. I brought it with me. Um, I don't know if you can see me. All I can see on the screen is what I'm sharing, but
Well, hopefully it's recording what I'm seeing, which
yeah.
you can see you there then.
So I love these books by Dallaire, the Dallaires. They were written in the 60s and illustrated by Edgar and Ingrid Perrin Dallaire. And this is the depiction of the seizing of Persephone from the Dolaire's book, and I'll actually just read a little bit of it. Hades, Lord of the Dead, the gloomy god of few words, mortals feared him so much that they did not dare mention his name, for they might attract his attention, and he might send for them. Instead of Hades, they called him the Rich One, and indeed rich he was. All the treasures in the ground belonged to him. They also called him the Hospitable One, for in his desolate underground realm, he always had room for another dead soul.
A whole new spin on hospitality.
Yes, well, we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but let me just turn the page to the page that's opposite the picture that you see on your screen where there, and it says Persephone grew up on Olympus, and her laughter rang through the brilliant halls. She was the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, and her mother loved her so dearly she could not bear to have her out of her sight. When Demeter sat on her golden throne, her daughter was always on her lap, and when she went down to earth to look after her trees and fields, she took Persephone. Wherever Persephone danced on her light feet, flowers sprang up. She was so lovely and full of grace that even Hades, who saw so little, noticed her and fell in love with her. He wanted her for his queen, but he knew that her mother would never consent to part with her, so he decided to carry her off. Now, I'll just mention, it doesn't say it here in this, children's book, but her name is also Cora, or
Oh,
it's Kore with a little kind of upside down V on top of it in ancient Greek. Cora, which means the maiden or the virgin. And in the Eleusinian mysteries, it had something to do with Persephone being abducted and then Demeter looking for her. So, and they usually referred to her. We don't know much about the Eleusinian mysteries in terms of what exactly they were all about, because you were sworn to secrecy if you went through the Eleusinian mysteries. But it had to do with going to the underworld, and it had to do with this search for the maiden, Cora, and they would call her in the Eleusinian mysteries Cora. So I'll continue with the story. One day, as Persephone ran about the meadow gathering flowers, she strayed away from her mother and the attending nymphs. Suddenly, the ground split open, and up from the yawning crevice came a dark chariot drawn by black horses, which you can see in the picture. At the reins stood grim Hades. He seized the terrified girl, turned his horses, and plunged back into the ground. A herd of pigs rooting in the meadow tumbled into the cleft. Does this sound like any Bible stories? I don't know.
I've heard of pigs getting
Yep,
running into what was
running
it, the
into the
sea?
river,
Yes.
yeah, or the Sea of Galilee. And
Mm.
Persephone's cry for help died out as the ground closed again, as suddenly as it had opened. Up in the field, a young swineherd stood and wept over what he'd seen. And Demeter rushed wildly about in the meadow, looking in vain for her daughter, who had vanished without leaving a trace. With the frightened girl in his arms, Hades raced his snorting horses down away from the sunlit world. Down and down they sped on the dark path to his dismal underground palace. He led weeping Persephone in, seated her beside him on a throne of black marble, and decked her in gold and precious stones. But the jewels brought her no joy. She wanted no cold stones. She longed for warm sunshine and flowers and her golden tressed mother, golden haired mother. Dead souls crowded out from cracks and crevices. All right, I'll skip ahead a little bit. Around the palace of Hades, there was a garden where whispering poplars and weeping willows grew. Here's a picture.
Thank you.
Mm. They had no flowers and bore no fruit, and no bird sang in their branches. There was only one tree in the whole realm of Hades that bore fruit. See if this reminds you of any Bible stories
Sounds
also.
like a Garden of Eden to
There
me.
was a little pomegranate tree. You
Mm.
might be able to see it in the lower left of that picture there in the middle of your screen. The gardener of the underworld offered the tempting pomegranates to the queen, but Persephone refused to touch the food of the dead. Wordlessly she walked through the garden at silent Hades' side. Above on earth, Demeter ran about searching for her lost daughter, and all nature grieved with her. Flowers wilted, trees lost their leaves, the fields grew barren and cold. And Demeter turned everything, she stopped allowing things to grow on the earth. And so a lot of times this is just explained as, oh, this is just about winter and, blah, blah, blah. She's also very angry with Zeus because it doesn't say it in this children's version, but Hades knew, or Pluto knew, there's no way Demeter's going to let him have Persephone. So he goes to Zeus, and Zeus says, yeah, you can have Persephone as your bride. I'll look away so that you can,
Mhm.
and I'll cloud things up so that you can get away with it, basically. So Demeter demands of Zeus, she says, listen, I won't let anything grow on the earth. All mankind will perish, and no one will be able to raise any sacrifices for the gods or burn, the nice steaks from the bulls that they sacrifice as the gods like the aroma of the meat. And then the people eat the meat. It's very interesting. Where are the gods if the sacrifices are eaten, they're distributed. You can read about it in the Odyssey. They slaughter the bulls, they burn the offerings. The gods are happy with the aroma, and then they have a big barbecue and eat all the, cuts of the steak that they've made. So, in one sense, the gods are within us. And actually, this story of going down to the underworld, it's very profound and important because the goddess Persephone is the one who later Greek philosophers, such as Parmenides, talk about an underworld journey where they are led down there by this goddess and to gain knowledge and wisdom and about the laws of right and wrong. And the goddess that they are being led by or that they're going to see is Persephone.
Mhm.
Okay, well, most people know when Demeter threatened, look, I'll wipe out the human race, Zeus relented and he said, okay, Hermes, go down to the underworld and tell my brother. So Hades is the older brother of Zeus. So is Poseidon. The three of them, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, they divided up the realms between them, and they basically, I think they cast lots, or I don't remember exactly the story, but Zeus gets the sky realm, Poseidon gets the sea realm, and Hades gets the earth realm, or really the underworld realm. But he's associated with grain actually too. That's why Demeter and Persephone. But when Hermes goes down there, he says, okay, Hades, even though Zeus is the youngest, he's the most powerful. He's got the thunderbolt weapon. So even though his Hades and Poseidon are his older brothers, they kind of grudgingly have to do what Zeus orders when Zeus does order that something should happen. So Hermes says to, as you can see in that picture, you can see Hermes flying in with his caduceus staff, and you can see Hades is carrying a staff with kind of a forked top, and then there's Persephone kind of with a veil over her head. And um, Hades had to obey. It says, I'll continue reading. Even Hades had to obey the orders of Zeus, and sadly he said farewell to his queen. Joyfully, Persephone leaped to her feet, but as she was leaving with Hermes, a hooting laugh came from the garden. There stood the gardener of Hades, grinning. You can see him in the picture if you look closely.
Mhm.
He pointed to a pomegranate from which a few of the kernels of the pomegranate were missing. Persephone, lost in thought and sadness, had eaten some seeds, he said. Then dark Hades smiled. He watched Hermes lead Persephone up to the bright world above. He knew that she must return to him, for she had tasted the food of the dead. And some versions say she ate 3 seeds, some 4 seeds, some 6 seeds. But basically, this number of seeds, she has to go back down into the underworld, and that's where we have winter. Nothing grows. And then when she comes back, it's spring. And you can see she's associated with the flowers of spring. She's throwing the flowers into the air in that picture where she's being abducted. And that's important for celestial clues. I'm including all this because we're going to go to the heavens in a little bit, but I want to show you a little bit more about this. And before I leave that part about the seeds and eating the food of the dead, there are a whole range of Native American myths from all the Native American nations across from California, all, to modern day California, all the way to modern day New York. This has been documented by writers, and I've talked about some of these documented um, like investigations in the 1800s and 1900s where people said, wow, look at all these parallels to the Greek myths, the
Oh.
the Orpheus story. There's a whole essay called the American Indian Orpheus myths. I won't go into Orpheus just now, but in Orpheus tries to lead his bride back,
Yes.
Eurydice, and she has to go back to the underworld. But in those stories, there's often this motif of if you eat the food of the dead, you have to go back down there,
Mm.
just exactly like this. And these researchers couldn't figure it out. Well, it's because we have an ancient worldwide system. This is all somehow connected. Nobody can explain how it's connected. Nobody can say why there's a connection.
And you
The
have a book titled The Ancient Worldwide
ancient
System,
worldwide system, right?
showing how all these myths are connected in various cultures across the world. It's a fabulous book. People check it out. I'll
Yeah,
put
thank you.
links to David's work in
Thank
the
you. Yes.
description to this video.
That one's 900 plus pages. I do also have one that's all about the Greek myths. It's called Star Myths of the World, Volume 2, Greek Mythology. But here's Persephone reunited with her mother Demeter, and then everything springs into bloom for the summer. I mean, spring. So those are the beautiful illustrations from the Dolaire's book. But let's go to some ancient illustrations. Here's one from the uh, the Roman from ancient Italy, and it shows the seizure of Persephone by Hades or Pluto wearing kind of a triangular cap. Sometimes he's said to have a cap of invisibility. There's also this one, which is just amazing. This is a fresco from a tomb in a place, the modern day name of this place is Vergina, kind of like Virginia, but without the I-A at the end. It's just an A at the end. And it's in Macedonia, modern day or ancient Macedonia, northern Greece.
Look
And
at the expressions on the face.
it is unbelievable. This tomb was only discovered in like 19, well, this whole region, these royal tombs of Macedonia were only discovered in the late 30s, like 1937. And then because of World War II, they were kind of neglected and not really pursued. And then they started uncovering them more after World War II. But they found like the tomb of Philip of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. But other tombs going back to like 10,000 years ago is what some of the sources that I was looking at
Wow.
say. I wasn't really aware of these tombs until I was looking for some paintings of the seizure or rape of Persephone. That is her on the right. Like
Mm.
look at Hades has got kind of, wild hair and beard, but look at her hair. It's just
Mhm.
exquisite details. This is a fresco from what's called a small royal tomb. We don't know, or I don't know if they've identified whose it is. You can kind of see one of her legs is bent. She's got like red robes there.
Mm.
But she's like reaching out with both arms. She's got bracelets on her wrist. Her hair is flying. It's very evocative. And then there's another woman kind of um,
Looking scared
yeah,
behind her.
leaned over on the side with one arm reaching up. That's important. But
Mhm.
he's in a chariot with those distinctive wheels. There's someone running on ahead. This is quite a fresco and very artistically talented. You can see both her legs if you look closely.
Yes, yes, you
It's
can.
really, she's got like one leg straight and one leg bent. But moving on, this is a later fairly famous Roman sarcophagus, which shows also the seizure of Persephone. I'll show you there's actually 12 figures and then a 13th in the center on this, if we just go from left to right. I'm not counting the little kind of cupids that we've got, but
Mhm.
I don't know if that the one that I've numbered two should be counted or not. Maybe it's only 12 figures if you don't count that one, but it looks like a female figure holding what almost looks like a cornucopia. We'll get to that
Oh, yeah.
later. Number three there. Four. Four might be the goddess Aphrodite.
Hmm.
Five, that might have been Poseidon or Neptune. Six is almost certainly Artemis. She has a bow and kind of two horns or maybe a moon on her forehead. So this is a Roman era sarcophagus site. It's pretty famous. Seven is Athena, the goddess Athena. Eight would be Persephone being abducted by nine, Hades driving the horses. You can see the little chariot down below. 10 down here, that might also be Neptune or a sea god. I'm not sure. It's probably actually Dionysus, god of wine. They're usually often pictured together, Hades and Dionysus. Interesting.
Oh,
Um,
why would that be?
I think they might actually be the same constellation.
Okay.
Yeah. 11 is Hermes with his caduceus. 12, that would be Demeter or the goddess of grain with the sheaf of wheat associated with Virgo also, sheaf of wheat, and 13 over there. So there's 13. That 13 actually looks like it could be Hercules. I don't know. Uh,
Mm. Big and
I'm
broad
not
with the
positive.
beard. Mm.
Yeah, I'm not positive. This is a Roman era. I'm sure someone's sorted out who each one is, but let's not get too distracted with that. It's just interesting that we got 12 with a central 13th. I could have made, Hades number 13 if
Mm.
I came back to him at the end, he kind of in the center there, or he and she are in the center.
Mm.
But it's almost like the zodiac, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Or the 12 Olympian gods. Often Hades isn't included in the Olympian gods. He's under the earth. He's considered a chthonic deity. Chthoniya is a location where some say the earth opened up, and that's where Persephone was grabbed and went under the earth. But um, this idea of spending time under the earth or in the underworld, we'll come back to that because it's not just winter and spring and summer. We don't have these amazing myths just to tell us, oh yeah, sometimes it's winter and sometimes it's summer. That's not really necessary. This has a deeper meaning. It actually has to do with Alvin Boyd Kuhn argued, someone I believe was very, very
Very enlightened
insightful,
man.
very insightful with his analysis, has
Mm.
to do with our condition. The underworld is right here. You're in it. This is the realm of darkness. And um, I
That's
would,
interesting because I was going to say before, if Zeus is the sky, Poseidon is the sea, and Pluto is the underworld, what about the land?
yeah, you're in it.
We're in it. We're on
You're
the,
in it. That's
the
right.
realm of
And
Pluto.
well, we go like Persephone, we go down into it and then we go back up. So the underworld is actually this life. And so we're like souls that belong somewhere else, but we're down here and we go and we come down for a while because we eat of the food of the underworld and we go back. That's what Alvin Boyd Kuhn would probably argue. Based on his arguments, I would say that that's the way he would argue it. And that's what those pomegranate seeds are all about. And to back that up, I also brought one of my other Dolaire's books. This is the Norse gods, and I've got a whole book, Star Myths Volume 4. But this is about there's a goddess of the underworld in the Norse myths called Hel. That's her name, Hel, with only one L. And it's her realm is where you go if you're a hero and you die in battle, you go to Valhalla. The Valkyries choose you to go up to Valhalla to be with Odin and feast and fight and you prepare for Ragnarok. You're going to be in the army of the gods to fight against the forces of darkness in the Ragnarok. But if not, you go to the realm of hell, and it says in the Eddas, these poetic Eddas, it says her realm is, it says all these things about her realm. It actually paraphrases it here in the Dolaires, but I've read the original poetry. It's even more evocative. It says things like, all who died of sickness or in old age. She did nothing to make her guests happy in her vast hall. The walls were a wicker work of winding serpents. On the roof sat a soot black cock or rooster who never crowed but was silent as death. Pitfall, her doorstep was called. Sick bed was the name of her bed, or sickness. So her table is called hunger, her bed is called sickness, her doorstep is called pitfall. All the
Sounds like the Kali Yuga to me.
Her knife is called hunger, her platter starvation. Well, where do we have sickness? Where do we have um,
Hunger.
hunger? Where do we have cold and sickness and all and privation in this life?
Mhm.
So it's almost, I wrote in this book that I published in 2018, that was actually before the ancient worldwide system. I did one on the Norse myths, and I said, it's talking about, it may be talking about reincarnation. You keep coming back to this life. You're gonna, if you don't do, if you don't fight, and I said that fighting could be metaphorical. It's really fighting with your mind to
Yeah.
grapple with and engage in this life, then you're going to come back to it again. You're going to go back to the realm of hell. Or if you really die fighting, you can go to Valhalla and
Mm.
escape that. So, but anyway, back to who is Hades, and look, all these myths around the world are, I believe, teaching the same thing with different names of the gods and goddesses, and that's evidenced by the fact that the Native American stories have these exact same patterns. I've talked about, there's a rain god of the Maya who has the same characteristics and depicted in the same postures as Zeus and other rain gods around the world. So I just want to point out, this is very interesting. This is not Hades and Persephone, as you might think at first. This is actually, as I said, Hades is often depicted with Dionysus, and that's what you're seeing here. Hades is the one with the big beard holding, what's he holding there?
A cornucopia.
The cornucopia was anciently associated with Hades, the god of the underworld. He's the god of wealth, but also
Wow.
of plenty. And all the grains that come out of the cornucopia, that's our symbol for Thanksgiving here in the United States, which
Mhm.
when we celebrate and give thanks for all the harvest, basically, that's associated with Hades. Even though Ceres, the goddess Demeter, she's not happy with Hades, but he's the god who has all these innumerable. This horn of plenty was never diminished. He's the god who can give gifts that never run out. Now, Dionysus is he looks a bit effeminate in this. He's a god who actually, to escape Hera's wrath, he was in some versions had to dress as a girl when he was little. But he liked to dress in like silks and long hair and all. But he's associated with wine. You can see he's got kind of a big flagon there um, of wine. But he's associated sometimes in sculpture. He's drawn with Hades. Here's another cornucopia. This is actually Hercules receiving the cornucopia. That's Hercules. You can tell he's got a lion skin kind of draped over
Oh,
his
yeah.
shoulder. He's receiving the cornucopia from Hades, who's kind of broken off to the right. And you can even see, most people believe that that is the knees of Persephone. You can see kind of
Ah,
down of someone
down on
sitting,
the
yeah, even closer.
bottom right. Mhm.
Yeah. So Hades is sitting to the right of Persephone. She's to our right as we look at it, but he's on her right.
Yes.
He's handing the cornucopia over to Hercules, because Hercules had to go down to the underworld to retrieve Cerberus in his 12th labor. And
Right.
in the 12th labor, he had to do these 12 labors, and the king Eurystheus, who was giving him all these labors, tried to come up with things that were just impossible.
Impossible.
But it says that Hercules was able to do it because he'd gone through the Eleusinian mystery. So he knew about going to the underworld. So he was allowed to go down there. And then Hades said, well, you can take the dog Cerberus if you can capture him without weapons. So apparently Hercules took off his lion skin to use as kind of a shield against the teeth of this three-headed dog and subdued him. And then he took him up to the realm of the living. And there's a whole story associated with it. But there's, I looked around, there's not much about Hercules receiving a cornucopia from Hades,
Mm.
but
So
it
this
is
is
a
quite
celestial
random then,
clue.
this. This is
Yeah,
something
it's really
unusual.
interesting. It is. It's unusual, but there are some ancient images of it. So we'll talk about that when we get to the stars. Here's one more. I just wanted to show a couple more. This is interesting because Hades here, you can see he's holding the cornucopia, and that's Persephone next to him. But look at his posture. He's actually reclining.
Ah, okay. So he's on a like a couch or something like
Yeah,
that.
he's like on a couch. He's holding up the cornucopia, and in his other hand, he's got like a dish. And here's a much easier to see, beautiful ancient Greek um, plate or something that shows Hades with his big, it's clearly a cornucopia. It's not just a drinking horn or something.
Yes, yes.
He's got Persephone next to him, but he's clearly reclining. That's a very distinctive posture. He's also got another little kind of table underneath. That's interesting too. But um, just one more. This is also an ancient
It looks
fresco.
Assyrian.
Yeah, it's kind of a different style, but
Mm.
look at how they're associated with the grains and the bounty.
And there's the rooster
Sure.
that doesn't crow.
Yep. So very, very interesting um, symbology. Just one more I'll show. This is actually a fairly famous one or fairly important one. He's sitting in between pillars on his throne. You can see his staff in this case has a little bird on the top of it.
Ah, is that what that is? Yeah.
Yeah. And Persephone there, she's holding almost like double flames in her hand. You see that? It's
Oh,
almost like a
yes.
double torch.
That's bizarre.
It's like it's got double jets coming off the end of it. Very interesting.
And what are the wheels?
Very interesting wheels, aren't they? Right above his arm, too, the wheels right above his arm. And look at his hand gesture there.
Peace.
Yeah, it's like a peace symbol. It's actually like two fingers up and also his thumb. This is a very distinctive hand gesture. It's associated with a very distinct constellation in the sky. So let's go to the night sky. Can you see the screen there?
Yes, yes, I can.
We've been here before. We've been to this section of the sky before. And I'll just, I've waxed on a little long and poetic as I've read these stories of Hades abducting Persephone. So I will just reveal the constellation with whom I believe the god of the underworld, the god of wealth, to be associated. And it's, again,
Everything's Ophiuchus.
Ophiuchus, the serpent holder. And why would I say that? Well, one clue. Now, look, Ophiuchus is a very important constellation. It's a constellation that's in the zodiac, but not in the zodiac. Down in the down in the underworld, but not in the underworld, or down in the world, but also connected to the divine world. Crosses the
Mm.
boundaries, goes back and forth. But this cornucopia, I thought about it a lot when I was writing those books and trying to figure out who are these different gods and goddesses. The cornucopia, look at the figure of Ophiuchus. It's a central body that's shaped like a tombstone, actually,
Hmm.
a tall rectangle with a triangle on top.
Hmm.
And then on either side are the serpent halves, it's called, or the serpent bearer. Ophiuchus means serpent bearer in Greek. That serpent winds around and has a tail side that's on the left as we look at it. And then on the right side, where I've got the word Ophiuchus, that's the head of the serpent. The little triangular top,
Hmm.
it's like a very long drinking horn or cornucopia.
I see.
Can you see that?
Hmm.
There's a
It's
figure
almost
in,
also like his staff with the little bird on top.
yes, we'll get to that too.
Sorry.
You're very, move to
Very
the
eager.
front, move to the front row, Kesenya. You're jumping ahead, giving away all my secrets here. But no, it's okay. That's very astute of you. It could be that little bird, but it could be,
Mm.
Utopia. This is actually a god from the Norse myths. Excuse me. Heimdall, or sometimes Heimdall, or they put the R on the end. It has to do with the noun case, if you know Old Norse. So we're not going to get into that, but it has to do with the role that the name is playing in the sentence, whether that R is there or not. And Heimdall is the watchman of the gods. He has this horn that's called the Yallar horn. I've written it there too, next to his name. But it kind of winds around his body. You see that?
Mm.
This is a
Like a serpent, isn't it?
like Ophiuchus.
Hmm.
Like I argued that for sure Heimdall is this same figure in the sky. And I'll tell you another reason why is Ophiuchus is located on top of, do you know what zodiac constellation? Directly above
Scorpio.
Scorpio. Scorpio has multiple heads. You can see Scorpio down there beneath the feet of
Right
Ophiuchus. I'll
underneath
draw
his.
it in later. Heimdall is said to be the son of nine mothers. Very mysterious. They even mention it in Hamlet's Mill. They say, oh, Heimdall is the son of nine mothers, and there's other gods around the world or figures in myth in the ancient India who are the son of multiple mothers, like nine mothers. And of course, that's very important. And we know what it means, but we're just not going to say. That's what
Hamlet's Mill
they
always
always
was
do that.
doing that, wasn't it?
Well, I know what it is. It's because, see, sometimes figures, Ophiuchus figures are descended from Hercules, which is right above. So, like Athena is actually a Ophiuchus figure. We won't get into it right now, but she's the daughter of Hercules. Sometimes Ophiuchus figures are born of Virgo, which is just to the right of Ophiuchus. It looks
Lying
like
on her back.
he's giving birth. Yeah. So that, but sometimes Ophiuchus figures can be the child of Scorpio with nine heads. That's why Ophiuchus, or that's why Heimdall has nine mothers, I argue. So that's
Mm.
an argument in
Makes sense.
favor of Heimdall being Ophiuchus. And going back to my favorite Dolare
Dole, yeah.
depiction, this is Heimdall on top of the Rainbow Bridge. So he's the guardian of Asgard. He's got the Yallar horn to alert Asgard of any approaching danger, and he guards the Rainbow Bridge. It's called Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge. Well, Ophiuchus has one foot right in what Rainbow Bridge? It stretches up to heaven
Oh, it's the
from the
Milky
earth, the
Way.
Milky Way. You can see it, on the
That's
screen.
the Rainbow Bridge. Okay.
He's guarding the Rainbow Bridge. And look, in the myths, there's this the I won't go into it, but the Dolaires talk about this bewitching goddess named Golvig. You can see her approaching
Oh,
up the
yes.
Rainbow Bridge, and he's mesmerized by her. She's so bewitchingly beautiful that Heimdall, for once, forgets to alert Asgard and blow his horn. All he can do is just stare at her. But strangely enough, she's not burned by the red on the rainbow. One of the reasons why the rainbow keeps out enemies is the red is actually flaming. So
Ah,
the Jotuns and the trolls can't get up the bridge to take over Asgard, but she's not burned by it. She's got a crown on her head there. She's actually in the exact position of
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius down there to the left of Scorpio. We'll look at Sagittarius in a minute, but all this to say is Heimdall is for sure Ophiuchus. Heimdall has this Yallar horn. This is an argument that Hades, with his cornucopia, is also Ophiuchus. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
How I'm laying that out?
Absolutely.
Now, when he abducts Persephone, I believe it's possible. Oh, one other thing about the cornucopia that adds to this interpretation. Who does he sometimes appear to give the cornucopia to for some reason? We don't know why. There's not
Well,
that many myths about it.
Hercules.
Hercules.
Yes.
Well, look, where's Hercules?
Right above.
Hercules or Heracles is definitely that constellation. There's no doubt.
Hmm.
I've proved that beyond any shadow of a doubt. And, you know, handing the cornucopia over to Hercules is makes sense when you see where Hercules is in the sky. Now that wheel, I didn't draw it out here, but Hercules is actually a spinning disc as well, and it's right in the crook. It's right above the crook of the arm of the Ophiuchus figure who's sitting in
Mm,
between the two pillars. You
mm,
see that? The
Yes.
spinning disc is based on the head of Hercules, that square.
Yes.
It's actually the swastika
I was
spinning head.
just going to
Yeah.
say that's where they get that from, isn't it?
And
Yeah.
it's always positioned right there in the crook of the arm. You could see it if I were to bring up a picture of Akhenaten worshiping the Aten, the sun disk. It's right above that crook in his arm.
Mm.
He's holding up he's holding up his arms, and his wife Nefertiti is right behind him in the position of Sagittarius and smaller because Sagittarius is smaller than Ophiuchus. Anyway, I don't have that. I should have. I didn't know
That's
where we
okay.
were going to go,
We'll
but
talk about that one another time.
yeah, that's the spinning disc. That's the spinning disc, but it's very distinctive, isn't it, in
Yeah.
the imagery that we saw. Now, um, we'll take Hercules out just because he's not really part of this story of the seizure of
Persephone.
Persephone. But the staff, with the two forks, that could also be, if you look at the serpent's head and just don't connect the lines across the top, that would be the kind of the two forks. You see them there?
Hmm.
See what I'm saying on the serpent's head, the little triangle at the top? Well, if the
Yes.
bottom of the
If there's,
triangle is just a V,
yes.
you get two forks there.
Hmm.
Now, here's who I think Persephone might
Oh,
be.
Virgo. Okay.
Virgo. Why? Well, for one thing, she's called Cora, the maiden, which means maiden really means virgin.
Virgin.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Also, she's gathering flowers, and when she's abducted, she kind of flings the bouquet of flowers up in the air. What's Look at her outstretched arm. Right
Yes.
above that outstretched arm, there's her flinging the flowers in the air, is this beautiful constellation. You got to have a dark night to see it. Coma Berenices, it's called. It means the hair of Queen Berenice
Mm.
or Berenices. The hair, coma means hair, but it's very beautiful in the sky, but it's like a bouquet of flowers.
Yes, it
Could
is.
be a bouquet of flowers. And also remember in one of those, she was holding kind of this double torch thing. That
Oh,
might
that's
be
right. Yeah.
yeah, in the underworld. But also she's kind of wearing a veil. She's the goddess of, when she's the goddess of death down there. Um, but also remember, Demeter, her mother, carries a sheaf of wheat. So this is why I believe Virgo carries a sheaf of wheat. The Coma Berenices or Berenices could be a sheaf of wheat too. So it may be that Virgo is Demeter, and that when she's the queen of the underworld, then she's more associated with Sagittarius, which I'll outline in a bit here. But um, also notice Hades is in a chariot drawn by four horses. Now, Ophiuchus, believe it or not, I've done a lot of looking at these chariots, especially in the myths of ancient India. There's chariots all over the place, or these kind of war carts all over in the Mahabharata, and Krishna is the divine charioteer. Boötes, who I've drawn right there, he's seated like a charioteer, and the chariot that he's driving has four horses in the sky right in front of him. I'm going to draw it out. That
Oh,
is the
okay.
Big Dipper.
Hmm.
The four stars of the Dipper, of the bowl of the Dipper. I actually had to add one in because kind of the planetarium was cut off at the top, but that's the
Yep.
Big Dipper right in front of Boötes. If you look at Ophiuchus, Boötes, Big Dipper, that is actually envisioned as a chariot in some myths, many myths around the world. In fact, there's one where Thor is has to dress as a bride to get his hammer back, and Loki is his charioteer, and it's the
Oh, of
same.
course he is.
It's the same. Yeah, Loki would be Boötes in this case, and Thor, who's Hercules, right above Ophiuchus, is riding in the chariot. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm not quite seeing how Boötes is a charioteer. Is he leaning out with his, like holding the reins like this?
Yeah,
Is that what I'm seeing?
it's like he's sitting in front of Ophiuchus, the cart,
Yes, yes.
holding the reins of the Big Dipper. The handle of the Big Dipper is like the reins. The four
Right.
horses are the four stars of the front of the Big Dipper. It's a little bit, it may be a stretch for some people who you got
It's
to
not quite as clear as the others, but I can see what you're
not
talking
super
about.
clear, but the fact that Thor, who's definitely Hercules, rides in a cart driven by Loki in that one myth, and he's right above Ophiuchus. I believe that the Ophiuchus is actually Hades in his chariot
Mm,
in
mm.
this particular part of the myth when he grabs Persephone.
Yes. Well,
But notice, yeah, so look, I think there's enough evidence to connect Hades with Ophiuchus
yeah,
most of the time. But notice there's also this kind of reclining Hades, which is very interesting. That reclining shape is actually more associated with
Hercules.
Virgo. No,
Oh,
Virgo.
Virgo.
Look at
Virgo.
it. And sometimes Dionysus actually reclines just like that too. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really interesting. Um, See, there's the reclining. It's
Yeah.
like there's a reclining form of Hades with the cornucopia, which is associated with Ophiuchus, is kind of over there, and he's reclining back on a couch over in Virgo territory, which means who's Persephone? Well, I think there's a case to be made that Persephone might be also associated with
Sagittarius.
Sagittarius. Look
Mm.
at the hairstyle of Persephone in that Greek plate.
Yeah, she's
And look
got
at
a bun
Sagittarius,
on
a
the
little
top of her
bun.
head, like that little feather in.
Yep. And look at what she's doing with her hands. It's almost like she's making the outline of the bow and arrow. I know it seems like a stretch, but these little hand gestures that they put, they're not throwaways when
Accidental.
the ancient artists do this. So maybe I've just confused everybody, and now everyone's saying, "Wait a minute,
Oh
is Hades
no.
Ophiuchus or not?" Well, they're mutable. They move around a little bit, kind of like
The
mutable
roles
stars.
they play this on the
Mhm.
stage.
Or
Ah,
in different myths. Yeah, in different myths. So it's interesting. It's almost like Hades has I wouldn't say a female aspect, but it's like he receives all the things of the earth. He receives everything. The underworld is very yin in very, in Chinese and Taoist mythology, the underworld is yin energy, spirits and shades and that's, yin is dark, cold, and female. So it's just interesting. We all have um, underworld aspects to us and plutonic aspects, and we go down to the underworld. This has to do with our life. All these gods and goddesses are in us as well as in the divine realm, I would argue. So that's going on here in some way. Also, it would make sense if Sagittarius is associated with um, Persephone for her to be holding the leash of Cerberus. Because who's Cerberus? I would
Betty
argue
Scorpio.
Scorpio. It's definitely Scorpio. And people may say, wait a minute, Scorpio? Scorpio is a scorpion. How could that be a dog? Well, it's really interesting. If you go do some research on Cerberus, you'll see that in some ancient myths, he has 100 heads. Sometimes he has 50 heads. Sometimes he has one dog head and multiple serpents' heads. Sometimes he's described as having serpents all along his back. He's got connections with serpents. But if you look at the outline of Scorpio that I've used right there, that is the H.A. Ray outline of Scorpio. It's pretty clear to see how it could be a scorpion, but you could also see how it's like a serpent.
Oh yeah.
And it could also have multiple heads because the stars that H.A. Ray has drawn into two pinchers could just be multiple heads like a hydra. In fact,
Yes, because there's a few more in there that are little and faint.
lots of stars there, hundreds or many. So, but look at how many, if Scorpio, if we just draw it like that, how many quote heads does it have? Well, up in the front, two, and then at the tail, one more. Like it comes to 3 points.
Hmm.
But it's often described, Cerberus is often described as fawning and kind of whimpering and putting his head down
Which
as
is the kind of the posture of the
a Scorpio.
Scorpio
Yeah.
constellation.
Especially when you come from one direction, from the left. But
Mm.
that
Mm.
when you get into the underworld, then you meet with his growling aspect. So
Coming from the right.
right. So when the shades are coming down into the underworld, they come across Cerberus and he's kind of like whimpering and putting his head down like like a meek dog. But once they're in the underworld and they turn around and try and get back out,
Right.
so it's almost like he's got one head in kind of whimpering towards the left, and then on the right, that's the realm of the underworld. That's where um,
Virgo is.
Virgo is in the cornucopia and all that. So very interesting. But
Mm,
then Sagittarius would be holding the leash. I mean, you can see
of
what
course.
look at the posture of the three statues there from ancient Egypt. It's like Cerberus is right at the feet of Hades,
Hmm.
Ophiuchus. She's a little farther away
Yes.
to one side, but she's holding the leash of Cerberus there. And this little feature here, I believe that could also be the pomegranate that she
Ooh.
eats, and that's why she has to stay in the underworld. That's the food on the underworld side that she consumes,
Mm-hmm.
because the top of it is made up of basically three stars. You can
And
see,
she has three seeds, doesn't she, that she
right. In some myths, she eats four seeds, or sometimes six, but four seeds would be all of the stars of the serpent's head. You see how it's a triangle, but it's not a perfect triangle because the top of it, there's actually three stars across the top. So it's
hmm.
kind of a crooked top to the triangle.
Yes.
Well, that crooked top to the triangle, I argue, is why Ophiuchus figures often have this very distinctive, we'll get to it, hand gesture. We'll get to that hand gesture. But remember the top of his staff, there's also a little bird.
Mm.
Aquila, the eagle, is at the top of the other side of the staff.
Ah,
Could be, could be
yep.
why. But also, there's that hand gesture. See the hand gesture? I think
Right.
that's the pomegranate hand. See how he's got a staff with a little bird on it. If you look at the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
image I just brought in, he's got the staff with a little bird on one side, and he's got the two fingers and a thumb on the other side. Who
Mm.
else holds up two fingers and a thumb like that?
Ha ha ha.
Lots of Ophiuchus figures. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
This is a Greek Orthodox or Orthodox icon, a very famous one of obviously of Jesus. Notice the similarity between the wheel above Hades
And the wheel behind Jesus'
and the
head,
cross
the
halo cross.
halo.
It's the same figure.
That's
I'm not
interesting.
saying that Jesus is Hades. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Jesus is an Ophiuchus figure. He comes down, he connects earth and heaven. He comes down, he spends some time in the underworld, and he goes back. It's this is Ophiuchus pattern. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to come like one foot in
Yeah,
the earth
in the
realm and the other
zodiac,
in the heavenly. Yes.
connected up to the most high
Yes.
God,
And
right?
just to explain that for people, that one foot that occurs at basically around the galactic center degrees of Scorpio in tropical astrology, that we have this 13th, if you want to call it that, zodiac sign, which is the foot of Ophiuchus that you can see down there, reaching down sort of towards Scorpio in the Milky Way. That's actually on the plane of the sun, or the ecliptic that the sun travels along. It will pass through that foot. So it is actually part of the zodiac signs, if we haven't ever discussed that before. I know we have, but for the newbies here who haven't heard that before. So there are 12 zodiac signs. Ophiuchus is the mysterious, unheard of 13th that the sun passes through.
The hidden sign.
Yes.
Just like Hades is in the underworld, mostly hidden,
Mm,
but he can hear your oaths. But you can see, everyone, hopefully everyone can see what you just described. His foot, the longer foot that goes right between Scorpio and Sagittarius, the ecliptic path passes through that. Now, also interesting, I didn't draw it in, I should have. In between Scorpio and Virgo, there's obviously, I mean, you can see the ecliptic path. Sagittarius is a zodiac constellation, so the sun is going to go through a Sagittarius. To get, from Scorpio to Sagittarius or Sagittarius to Scorpio, if you draw a line between those two, you see it goes through that foot of Ophiuchus.
absolutely.
Then to continue on to Virgo, it's got to go through one more constellation. I didn't draw it in.
Libra.
Obviously, Libra, right under the word Ophiuchus. You can see, what does Libra look like? Well, it's a triangle. It's the scales. It's the balances. A triangle with two little, uneven
Weights.
balances.
Hmm.
That's like that little table. Remember, I pointed it out
Oh,
when
yes.
when Hades was reclining like Virgo, he had a little table underneath. That's Libra. Look at how Libra looks like a little table.
It
Even
does.
even in the Greek picture just above Jesus there, you can see he's in between two pillars. That's typical of Ophiuchus figures.
Hmm.
Solomon is also an Ophiuchus figure. The Solomon's temple has two pillars.
Samson between two pillars pushing
Yep,
them over.
correct. You got it. But the little, you can see a kind of almost a little table underneath Ophiuchus,
Mm, mm. Yes.
and you can see the wheel above the crook of his arm, the crook of his arm that's got the two fingers. That's where Hercules is located, the
Hmm.
spinning wheel, specifically the square shaped head of Hercules. There's a different way to outline Hercules to where it's a spinning
Yes,
wheel.
that's
So,
right.
but if you look at Ophiuchus, you can also see why Jesus and the shape of the cross that Jesus is crucified on comes from Ophiuchus. If I draw a line right down to Antares there,
Hmm.
he's
Hmm.
crucified in between two thieves. That's the serpent has on either side.
Hmm.
So that's where I finish up on this
Amazing. So
discussion.
what do you see? Like if Pluto is the god of the underworld and he is an Ophiuchus figure, very mysterious and so on and so on. We know, and I hope I'm not misinterpreting your message, Dave, but we know that the Ophiuchus figure, because it's the 13th zodiac sign, it has connections to our higher self and to our deep psychological self that isn't readily visible. This Jesus figure is a representation of higher self, higher knowledge that has a connection to the divine. It's all this symbolism. And so Pluto being, especially retrograde, has this very deep inner, you know, rebirthing energy, just like Jesus has, is a story of, dying and coming back to life. That's also a Pluto motif as well. Are you sensing these similarities? I'm not saying that Pluto is Jesus, but they're both represented in the constellational mythology by this figure of Ophiuchus that has some very similar storylines to it or motifs to it.
Yes, you're hitting on all these. These are very deep, esoteric messages in
Mhm.
the myths. So you said higher self, and then you also said, our deep knowledge, our deep, I like to sometimes say our deeper self
Yeah.
that gets suppressed, that we can become disconnected from.
Mhm.
So if Jesus is our higher self, you could also say our deeper self. Hades is also associated with our deeper self. But think of this story of Cora, the maiden, or Persephone. She gets separated from her mother, or we get separated from who we really are when we're down here in this realm. It's not just, these myths aren't just about, I already said, a lot of times people say, oh, yeah, of course the myths are based on the sky because they had to do the seasons and they had to know when to plant their crops. This is very common, and I get frustrated
I
and
hear it too.
angry about it because I'm like, no, that's not why they needed these profound, amazing, sometimes disturbing myths. Just to tell you, don't plant when there's snow on the ground and frost and ice coming. It- you don't need myths to know that. Then, okay, well, it's deeper. It's about life and death. And Alvin Boyd Kuhn said that's right, but we often get it wrong because the underworld, he says they often think that, the realm of the underworld, that's the realm of death. And this life is the realm of sunshine and flowers. Nope. He says that's exactly wrong. We come down to the underworld, we're separated from the spiritual, and we got to get back in touch with it. And I would say, yes, that's right. He's definitely way more on the right track than anyone probably before him. But it's not all these profound myths just about, okay, well, we incarnate and we're in this kind of underworld, and then we go back to the spirit realm and then we come back. It's not just, okay, we're born, then we live a while, then we die. We don't need myths for that either. That's actually
Just
anyone
happens, doesn't
who's been
it?
around long enough, unfortunately, has experienced death somewhere in their family or in their experience with their friends. So we know that too. But what he's saying is when we're down in this realm, we're separated from our deeper identity, our spiritual identity. But not only that, I think the myths are telling us we're separated from our deeper self sometimes, or almost always. And in this realm, this searching, why did the Eleusinian mysteries have to do with Demeter searching desperately for her daughter who's been buried and separated from her through this trauma of the rape of Persephone? Because that's what we are supposed to be doing. So in the Eleusinian mysteries, the initiates, we don't know everything about it, but we know they had to search around in the dark and carry torches and call out Persephone or Cora, where are you? They had to imitate Demeter searching for her daughter
Right.
because it's a symbol of what we're supposed to be doing in this life, searching urgently for our deeper self that has been buried, that we've got to reconnect with.
Mm.
So Pluto will give you the gifts if you ask for him. Look, he gave the cornucopia to Hercules, or he said to Hades, yeah, go ahead. As long as you just got to do it all by yourself. You can't
Mhm.
use any of your famous weapons. We've got to do this job. No one else can do it for you. There's a song in the Odyssey. Odysseus has to go down to the underworld too.
Yeah.
In order to resolve his problem, he's got to go down to the underworld. And there's a movie that's been made by the Coen brothers called "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou,"
Which is the
where it's
story
all
of,
about the Odyssey.
yeah.
And in that movie, there's these um, kind of deep songs, and one of them says, "Nobody else can go that you got to go to that lonesome valley. Nobody else can go there for you." That's what it's saying. You got to go through. It doesn't mean, yeah, you got to die, because Odysseus had to go to that lonesome valley, and in the movie, the character that's played by George Clooney, who's Odysseus, has to go. Nobody else can go there for him. He's got to go through it, but he doesn't die. He's got to go down into the valley to rescue that thing of great, precious. In that case, it was his wedding ring before the flood. But nobody else can go through this process for us. We've got to reconnect. We've got to go through that. We've got to go down into the Pluto
Mhm.
work and
And that's what
edge it
Pluto
up.
retrograde's all about, baby. So
That's
we're
what these
doing it.
myths are telling us. That's
Yeah.
exactly what. So these myths are not there to depress you. These
Mm.
myths are there to guide you and
Mm.
say you're going through something really profound and deep and painful because you've lost track of. We're all in this condition. That's what the Eleusinian mysteries are trying to say. You're all in the condition of Persephone taken down to the underworld, or Demeter searching for that lost part that you're so connected to.
Can I ask a last question before we wrap things up? So we're not to call on Pluto. In ancient Greece, they said, don't mention his name. Like, we don't want to alert him to. Why would that have been that we don't want to draw Pluto's attention to us? Do you have any theory on that idea?
So he would hear our oaths. So maybe there are some times where you do
Because I just
go
asked
by the
because if
stick.
he carries the cornucopia
Mm.
and is the God of great wealth and therefore can give great blessing when he chooses, why would we not pray to him or call
Very
on him
perceptive
or
question. Very insightful question. Maybe it has to do with that, this idea that I wrote about in the title of my thesis, my master's thesis, which was about oaths, was entitled Words Not Deeds. Words Not Deeds. Deeds were, it was called Deeds Were Not Words Not Deeds. That was the words, Deeds Not Words was the motto of the 22nd Infantry Division, which I was in the 22nd Infantry Division. It was one of the regiments I was with, regiment, not division. 22nd Regiment, Deeds Not Words. And so the name of my myth was Deeds, Words, Deeds, and the Heroic Boast in Old English Literature, something like that. But it was more about deeds, not words. So maybe, I don't know, your insightful question is just making me
think?
have to
It's
think and
making me
maybe
think too.
come up
I
with
have
an
no
answer.
answer.
maybe it's like, look, deeds, words can be taken lightly. You've got to be careful with them. Oaths should be, profound, and they should basically be the same as deeds. But
Mhm.
maybe the reason why you don't call on his name, or he doesn't want to hear a bunch of words. He wants, you got to actually, I hate this phrase, and I know you do too. You've actually got to what? Do the work.
I thought you were going to say hold space
And
for
I
me.
gotta, I'm here to hold space for you while you do the work. Look, it's become cliched, but
Yeah.
it's cliched because, well, it's a truth that's been maybe over turned into words and taken lightly. But in reality, we got to go plow deep down there. You got to plow deep, and a bunch of words is not what
Well, I mean,
the
in
wealthy one wants to
astrology,
hear, or the Pluto wants to hear. You're gonna have to do it. You're gonna have to feel it.
vows are a seventh house thing, and the seventh
Mm,
house is also like deep commitment. It's the house of marriage. It's the house of business contracts. It's that like there's no lightness to it the way there is in a fifth house, like romance and dating and all that kind of cool stuff.
mm.
This is the heavy duty, right? I'm in this, boots and all. And that's the realm of the chart that has to do with vows. So, what you're saying here is we're making an oath, we're making a vow, it's serious, and maybe that's I don't know much more about the Pluto mythology than the
Mm.
Persephone myth, but maybe he's a very serious kind of God, and we need to take our communication with him seriously and not flippantly, maybe.
I
Just
think that is
theories
so
that
true.
are
So true. But we have to go down to that space. I didn't even think of this when we prepared for this meeting, but if you look at where I am,
you're down in
I'm
the
at the bottom,
basement.
I'm down in and look at what's right next to you. Flowers.
Flowers. I'm just
And what are you
throw them
wearing?
everywhere.
Persephone. Anyway, we're
Very
embodying
symbolic.
this myth. I didn't even plan on that, honestly, but subconsciously, obviously, it was in
I
there.
love it. The universe works in mighty synchronistic ways. It's wonderful. Well,
Our
Dave,
our deeper subconscious self
we
knows,
know, we
even
know.
when we don't.
I want to thank you so much for this deep dive into the god of the underworld. It's been truly amazing, as all the analysis that you provide is, and it just reminds me of like how gifted you are at interpreting these ancient myths and their connections and this connection to the stars. So if anyone else is similarly inspired like I am, Dave has a number of books, I think 11 in total available, a number of courses that you can undertake as well to learn more of this amazing ancient system and its connection to the stars, its actual connection to astrology as well. It just adds another layer and another dimension to our understanding of esoterica and occult practice, if you would allow me to use that term. So thank you so much, Dave, and we'll be back again hopefully next week, but if not, it'll be the week after or something. Every Wednesday, we attempt to put a video together for your enjoyment, looking at the stars and the myths and the astronomy. Do join us, and thank you, Dave, for joining us here at Guiding Star Astrology.
Thank you so much, Ksenia.
Thanks, everybody. Uh,